For all the latest on the Cardinals, Coyotes, D-backs, Suns, ASU, and the U of A, visit NBCSports1060.com.
Oh, I'm staring at the T-shirts. That's right. We got 20th anniversary T-shirts in today. Outstanding. Nice, very nice. Thanks to Tony, and thanks to Santisi Brothers as well. 20th anniversary Red Zone T-shirts. I'll have them all season long while supplies last. Come on out here, play the free fantasy football challenge, get a free T-shirt. It's that simple. We're located at 2710 West Bell Road. That's just west of I-17 on Bell Road in the Bell Canyon Pavilions. Come on inside the restaurant. I'm just before the entrance to the game room. We've got the Red Zone with Russ Bliss celebrating 20 years of fantasy football on NBC Sports Radio, AM 1060. They look sweet. Nice. I love this job. I have loved this job for 20 years. I've been so honored to do this for 20 years and be on these airwaves and be with you guys, the fantasy football fanatics that have helped make this industry something never believed 20 years ago. 20 years ago, there wasn't fantasy football everywhere. That's why this radio program actually took off, was because it filled a niche that wasn't being filled anywhere else. But come on out here to Santisi Brothers, play the free fantasy challenge, get a Red Zone 20-year anniversary T-shirt. Joining us on the program now, as he does every Tuesday night, our pal from SleeperU and FantasyFootballStarters.com, Smitty, joins us on the program. Smitty, I assume you want me to reserve one of these shirts for you.
Yeah, please.
I can definitely do that. Of course, the big news from earlier today, Teddy Bridgewater injury. Torn ACL, they announced, dislocated kneecap. What's going to happen now? Shaun Hill is a guy that's he's looked competent and at times in his career. Is he going to be able to be successful as a starter in Minnesota?
Yeah, wow, what a big injury. I mean, some of the players were even throwing up, I heard, that the injury was so bad. It's got to be a bad thing for that Vikings offense, especially from a fantasy perspective, just because, Shaun Hill, he is competent. I think he had a 63% passer rating. He took the Rams to a 3-5 record while he was starting. So not a horrible backup, but you definitely don't want to see him in that lineup. I think it hurts AP a little bit because the passing attack won't be quite as potent. But we'll have to see. Shaun Hill's definitely not any kind of fantasy starter or even really a backup by any means, unless you're playing in a huge 2 QB league.
Now, of course, another big quarterback injury that we heard about over the weekend, Tony Romo. What's the latest on Tony Romo in that back injury?
Yeah, we're looking at possibly being out through the Week 7 bye, and then potentially looking at whether he's going to, come back after that. And I think, Jerry Jones said he wasn't sure. There's a lot of rumors and talk about the team, a lot of the players supporting Dak Prescott. He was a guy we talked about just last week, Dak Prescott, one of the bold predictions in Sleepers heading into 2016. He had 454 yards and a 5 TD to 0 interception ratio in the preseason. That's just passing, Russ. The guy had 7 carries for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's definitely a fantasy threat. He's definitely a threat to Romo's future and job in Dallas. And I don't think it's a step back for Dez Bryant or any of those Cowboys fantasy players. I think Dak is a dynamic player, and I think the team is probably better with him under center. I know that's bold. I know that's talking really early on and predicting things for a quarterback that hasn't ever started a game. But I think we're looking at, just as we predicted Russell Wilson's rise the year he didn't ever start a game. He was looking good in the preseason, wasn't even named the starter yet of Seattle. But we predicted him to be one of the next elite quarterbacks in the NFL, and I think that's the same thing with Dak Prescott.
Now, Dak Prescott, he has looked great all preseason, but I wonder whether it will continue once we get into the regular season and these vanilla defenses that he's been seeing all of a sudden start really scheming and throwing different looks at him.
Yeah, complex schemes. It will be interesting once he sees those, but I think he has had a little bit of a dose here and there throughout the preseason. He's been really composed, He has that rushing ability that I think makes it hard for defenses to plan against him. And I just think we're looking at, just like with Russell Wilson, we didn't have a lot to go on. You kind of got to look at the player, look at some of the film, look at some of the footage you have, and just kind of see, like, does this guy look like he's going? You don't have a lot to go on. Does he look like he's going to be possibly a next rising fantasy football quarterback, rising star? And I think we're looking at it.
Now, are there any trades being worked out, possibly? Mark Sanchez flopping in Denver. Are we going to see Mark Sanchez go to Dallas or go to Minnesota?
I don't know about Sanchez. I know that I believe that Denver was calling the Cowboys, but the Cowboys weren't calling Denver. So I don't know what's going to happen with Sanchez. I don't think he's any kind of upgrade whatsoever or any kind of security blanket. I'm not a big fan of Mark Sanchez, never will be. At this point, I don't see any trades happening, but anything can happen in the next couple days.
Now, how about your thoughts on Denver's quarterback, Trevor Siemian? He's won the starting job over Sanchez, but Paxton Lynch has not looked bad getting playing time, but he doesn't quite look ready. How long do you think it's going to be before Paxton Lynch's superior skill set overtakes Trevor Siemian?
I hope it takes him at least a half a season to get him in there, because I think if you rush him, it could definitely stunt his growth and kind of ruin some of the upside. Sometimes QBs get in there too early, and I think that he's got a lot of weapons that could kind of carry him with the two receivers, two of the best receivers in the league in terms of a duo. I think that Paxton Lynch has strong upside, but I think Siemian looks pretty good. 10 of 17 for 122 yards and a touchdown, one interception. That's not bad. It's efficient enough to kind of string it along for, I think, a couple weeks and get Paxton Lynch a little bit more ready. But I think eventually we will see him in there. But Siemian isn't too bad.
Now, let's move on to the running backs. And Smitty from SleeperU and FantasyFootballStarters.com, my guest here on the radio program. Let's look at the Dallas, go back to them. Ezekiel Elliott, is there any concerns about him showing up a little out of shape?
I just wrote on this recently, and I've been a huge Ezekiel Elliott fan all through college, entering the pros. I have some concerns with the way him being in the news for going into a pot dispensary, some of the decision making that he's doing, and I worry a little bit. And there's been some drug use rumors in the past, a lot of rumors, so you can't really take it all as if it's fact. But I do have some concerns about him. But I think that in redraft, if you're just talking redraft, he's a top 10 overall pick, potentially top 7 to 10 overall. I think you take him any higher than that, and you're needing him to explode in order to even break even. So I like him this year. I think he's going to hit a rookie wall at some point, something that people aren't factoring in. I think week 10 or 11, he's going to slow down a little bit. He might regain his strength and finish strong, but he's a good trade candidate, Russ, in that week 10 to week 11 range.
Now, how about Alfred Morris as a backup? Darren McFadden currently. What a surprise. And Alfred Morris looked competent behind Dallas's outstanding offensive line when he's gotten chances. Do you think that Alfred Morris is a must-have handcuff for Ezekiel Elliott owners?
Yeah, I think it's a situation where like you said, the offensive line's so good that if Elliott was out for a couple games, you would definitely plug Morris in for a couple weeks. And he's still got a little bit left in the tank. I think behind that offensive line, he would be very competent.
How about Carlos Hyde? Turning our attention to San Francisco, we know the woes at quarterback that they've got, so they're going to rely on a running game in Carlos Hyde. And we saw Chip Kelly's offense run an awful lot in Philadelphia. Is he over his concussion? Is he going to be ready for Week 1?
Yeah, he's cleared for non-football drills, not a concern. And I think he's definitely a big breakout candidate this year. His value is pretty solid. You don't have to overpay to get Hyde. I believe his ADP is right around the 4.03 to 4.06 range, and that's a screaming deal considering the players that are right around that area. Matt Forte, Jonathan Stewart, Eric Decker, Julian Edelman. That's a great spot to get a guy that could potentially be a low-end fantasy running back 1 in 2016.
Now let's go back to the Washington Redskins. Alfred Morris's former team, Matt Jones. What's the update on his shoulder injury? Is he going to be ready for Week 1?
Jay Gruden, the latest he said is he's progressing nicely. He's shooting for Week 1, according to a lot of reports, but we're kind of in the dark a little bit on how ready he's going to be for Week 1. My guess is he's going to be iffy. He may not even get a full starter's carries, but Matt Jones should be fine until his next injury. But I think he's a decent upside guy per start. It's just a matter of how many games he can start.
Now, of course, also the problem with Matt Jones is a fumbling issue. He had that last year.
Right.
He started off hot, but then he started to fumble the football and fell in the doghouse. Who would step up if Matt Jones was unavailable? I know that Washington lost one of their running backs to injured reserve, I think, earlier
Marshall.
this week or earlier today. Right, the rookie. So
Yeah.
Who would step up? Or would they be a candidate for a team that's trying to trade a running back like Niall Davis, guy that we've talked about several times the last couple of years on the program, who really looked good in Kansas City, but somehow fell out of favor?
Yeah, Niles Davis is wasting away on that Kansas City roster. I think he'd be a great starter for any team looking for a running back. But Chris Thompson's the number 2 on paper, but I think Rob Kelly would most likely be the guy that would step in. He had 12 carries, 51 yards and last Friday in the preseason outing, and I think he's really good. He's good at blitz protection. I think he'd definitely step in and be one of those kind of sleeper flex type players for fantasy leaguers if they're crafty enough to grab him. But if Matt Jones comes back, he'll definitely take a back seat. But he's someone to keep an eye on if Jones does start fumbling or gets banged up again or has a setback.
He's Smitty from SleeperU and FantasyFootballStarters.com. In about 10 minutes, we're going to open up the phone lines, 602-260-1060. If you want to get on board, you got questions about your fantasy draft or perhaps a draft that you've already had and are concerned about your team, you got questions about it, dial us up. We will get to those right after the bottom of the hour break. But, Smitty, let's continue on talking about running backs. One that had a lot of appeal for a lot of people heading into this year, New England's Dion Lewis. He goes on the PUP list. He's not going to be back until Week 7 now at the earliest. How does this affect his draft standing, and who will be the likeliest replacement for his role as the pass-catching back in New England?
That's a tough one. Probably James White. LeGarrette Blount could get some early down work. It's kind of tough to tell who would be the more valuable fantasy-wise. Blount touchdown leagues, you obviously want him, and James White might get the receptions. But Dion Lewis, what a bummer, because he was a guy that was kind of disguised as a running back 2/3, but had really had low-end fantasy running back 1 appeal at times heading into this year. So he could be back. I'm thinking more around Week 8 or 9, but he's good value because you can get him in fantasy drafts the later rounds. We're talking double-digit rounds.
He's Smitty from FantasyFootballStarters.com joining us on the program. Let's go ahead and get a little bit into wide receivers now. A.J. Green suffered a minor knee injury. It's not considered serious. Are you concerned at all?
No, I think a bruise at the most, so not an issue.
Now, how about John Brown? Any update on whether the Cardinals' number 3 wide receiver is going to be ready for Week 1 or not?
He's been cleared and could play, but most all reports are suggesting that he's not going to suit up for Week 1.
You know, it's always kind of concerning about concussions, especially with smaller players like John Brown. The effects of concussions, they can just, go away for a couple days and then all of a sudden come back. That's kind of like what happened with him when he suffered the concussion. It looked like as though he was going to be able to come back. Then all of a sudden the headache sprung up again. Are you concerned at all about John Brown and his durability during the regular season?
Yeah, you always are with concussions, like you said. I don't really know if it's something that he's going to continuously battle, but the fact that he's been cleared and most likely isn't going to play Week 1, it is pretty concerning for the long term. You just have to wonder, what symptoms he's really having and why is he not suiting up. I know he doesn't have a lot of time with the game being an early game, but it's definitely concerning given he's already been cleared and could play if he wanted to.
You know, you look at the Cardinals, they've been playing it very carefully with Larry Fitzgerald. Fitz, of course, starting to get up there in age. Michael Floyd has had injury issues throughout his career, and Jerron Brown has actually looked very good throughout this preseason. Is he a guy that you've got on any type of radar as an early season pickup if any of these Cardinals wide receivers can't be durable?
In very deep leagues and in leagues where, or if one of those receivers is out for a significant amount of time, it's definitely a must-grab, yeah. But aside from that, it's tough to envision him having any kind of consistency. You know, you'd start him the week he doesn't do anything, and then you'd have him on your bench the week he did. So an injury would have to happen for a spot to open up on any of my rosters for him.
Hey, Smitty, we've got 1 minute. I'm going to put you on hold. We'll bring you up on the other side, hopefully take some phone calls, and continue discussing some of these wide receivers and tight end injuries that we haven't covered yet.
Sounds good.
That's Smitty from SleeperU and FantasyFootballStarters.com. Joins us every Tuesday night on this radio program. I'm Russ Bliss. I am live at Santisi Brothers Pizzeria and Sports Grill, my home away from home during the NFL's regular season. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evenings. Even though I'm not on the air on Thursdays, I am still here from 6 to 8, giving you an extra chance to come out, play the free Fantasy Football Challenge, get your entry in for week number 1, and I've got 20-year anniversary T-shirts to hand out. I'll be doing that all season long while supplies last. We're going to step aside. We'll be right back. 602-260-1060 is the number. It's the Red Zone on NBC Sports Radio, AM 1060.
NBC Sports Radio, AM 1060 is the Valley's play-by-play home of the Oakland Raiders.
Touchdown, Raiders!
Go to NBCSports1060.com for the full 2016 schedule.
Welcome back to the Red Zone, talking fantasy football and the NFL on NBC Sports Radio, AM 1060. Been doing it for 20 years on this radio station. It is my pleasure to be your host of this program. I'm Russ Bliss, live at Santisi Brothers Pizzeria and Sports Grill, where we got our 20-year anniversary T-shirts. Come on out, fill out a Fantasy Challenge roster, get a free 20-year anniversary T-shirt, and show your support for the radio program. Always a great time out here at Santisi Brothers. Appreciate the fact that they keep bringing me back year after year. And, of course, got to say thanks again to Miller Coors for stepping up again. Coors Light specials, $4.25, 25-ounce drafts from 4 to 7 every Tuesday, Wednesday evening while I'm out here at Santisi Brothers. Definitely take advantage of that. Now, 602-260-1060 is the phone number. If you've got fantasy draft questions or questions about your fantasy team, maybe you've already had your draft, Smitty from SleeperU and FantasyFootballStarters.com is our guest. We'll be able to answer your questions. So if you want to jump on board, go ahead and do that now, 602-260-1060. Now, Smitty, right before the break, we were talking about the Arizona Cardinals wide receiver situation, but there was another team that the Miami Dolphins, there were a lot of people that were very high on Devanta Parker as a potential sleeper heading into this year. No, he tweaked his hamstring. There was some hype about him in fantasy, but if he can't shake the hammy, and that's a lingering injury, does this mean that Kenny Stills is now a viable sleeper candidate himself?
I don't know. I'd say viable sleeper candidate. He's somebody that you might roster in a very large league, but Devanta Parker will eventually, I think, take that number 2 role. He's just been banged up. They're trying to kind of motivate him. But I don't understand the hype behind Devanta Parker when you have Jarvis Landry sitting in front of him, a guy that, in my opinion, and he's one of my bold predictions this year, is going to be a top 5 to 10 fantasy wide receiver, and you can get him so much later than that. He is an elite player with a skill set similar to Odell Beckham Jr., and these two are like, brothers in a sense. They work out together. They have similar workout routines. They're so skilled, these two players. And I think we're going to see Jarvis Landry enter that top 5 to 10 wide receiver arena in 2016. So I'm really excited, and I don't get the Devanta Parker hype heading into this year.
How about the San Francisco 49ers? Bruce Ellington, injured. Not that I was all that hopeful for any 49ers wide receivers to be fantasy relevant, but he was considered by many to be a sleeper candidate. Are there any 49ers wide receivers you'd take a chance on?
Torrey Smith. Vance McDonald, the tight end, might be the most, might get the most targets. in that offense, given how Alex Smith passes the football. I'm not super excited, but Vance McDonald at this point.
Yeah, San Francisco, Blaine Gabbert is the starting quarterback. Colin Kaepernick Colin Kaepernick just has looked horrible and disinterested during the preseason. I really have to wonder if that team's going to win more than 3 or 4 games.
Yeah, sorry, I meant Blaine Gabbert. Gabbert's not a good passer, in my opinion. I just don't see him ever thriving at the NFL level. And Colin Kaepernick, there's so much media frenzy going on around him. I don't see how he succeeds this year if he's ever tossed into that lineup. But they're just I don't see any receiver but Torrey Smith even doing remotely well, and I don't think I roster anybody but Carlos Hyde on that 49ers roster heading into 2016. I know that makes Jeff Fortini, one of the owners of Fantasy Football Starters, probably pretty upset, but what can you do?
Hey, I tell you what, I had to go through some lean years with the Rams, so he gets to go through some lean years with the 49ers for some of those successful years that they've had. Now, you mentioned Vance McDonald, the tight end. Let's turn our attention to tight ends. Ladarius Green goes from San Diego to Pittsburgh this offseason. Now he's on the PUP list. What are his injuries, and is he ever going to live up to the potential that we saw in him in San Diego?
I'm starting to doubt that we'll ever see that player that we thought we would see. Ankle and headache on injured reserve PUP list. Not sure when he would return, if he ever will. Kind of gives a bump to Jesse James, a tight end that a lot of people in very, very deep dynasty leagues have been talking about for a little while. He's not going to be a monster fantasy sleeper by any means, but a good guy to pick up if you're in desperate need at tight end position. But I've lost all hope on Green being the player that we thought he was going to be. He's going to be turning 27 next year. I'm just not. I don't have high hopes.
Now, how about Detroit? I mean, Eric Ebron, Brandon Pettigrew were supposed to be like this 1-2 punch at tight end. Well, they're injured now. What's going on with them and their injuries, and is there any fantasy hope attached to either of them?
I think Crockett Gilmore is going to be the best tight end on that roster, regardless of the pecking order right now. I think he actually will be a serviceable low-end tight end one in deeper leagues. So he's definitely a guy I grab. I've liked him for a while. I think he's got a pretty good skill set.
Oh, you're talking about the Baltimore Ravens now with the injury with Ben Watson there. Yeah, Crockett Gilmore. I mean, Dennis Pitt is injured. And who was the other tight end that they had?
Sorry, Russ, the phone was cutting in and out. I thought you were talking about the Ravens situation.
Yeah. Well, they're in a situation themselves with Ben Watson, of course, being gone now with a torn ACL for the remainder of the season. And Dennis Pitt is still not ready to come back. And Max Williams, last year's rookie tight end that they had, being injured. Crockett Gilmore is going to get a lot of playing time in what is considered to be an offense that is geared towards throwing towards the tight end position.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about him. Was your question, again, your phone cut in and out, was it about the Detroit situation?
Yeah, Eric Ebron and Brandon Pettigrew.
Right, okay, so sorry about that. Ebron, I think Ebron will be decent this year. I don't think Pettigrew is even in the picture, but, that could change heading into the middle of the season or something. But Ebron is a guy that just, he hasn't quite been as good as people have hoped, but he's still young. So I think he's got some decent upside, and he's not anybody I would start given how deep the tight end pool is in fantasy this year. But he's a guy I definitely roster as like a tight end too in hopes that he surprises.
He's Smitty from SleeperU and FantasyFootballStarters.com. He joins us every Tuesday evening on the program. Smitty, let's take a look at some of your sleeper predictions for each of the positions this year. Who are guys that you're targeting in drafts because their ADP is just so low and you can get a real steal like a round before?
Wow. There's the funny thing about this topic is a lot of people don't like to talk about big name players as sleepers. And I think that the term sleeper, at least how I define it at SleeperU, is all different levels. You could have a first round sleeper, a guy that's number 10 that could be the number 1 overall pick, a guy in the second round. So there's a lot of different levels. So if we're talking high end names,
David Johnson for the Cardinals, Devontae Freeman for the Falcons, LaShawn McCoy for the Buffalo Bills. These are running backs that can play like top, 5 to 10 running backs. David Johnson, actually, I have as my sleeper number 1 overall running back this year in 2016. Now, granted, his ADP is about number 6 or 7 overall, so it's still pretty high. But considering he could be that number 1 running back, that's why I still say there's some value there. If you're talking about middle-range running backs, Melvin Gordon, Jeremy Langford, Carlos Hyde, DeMarco Murray, Jeremy Hill, these are all running backs that are being ranked well below high-end running back 2 type value. But I think all of these guys, all 4 of those, and even Jeremy Hill a little bit, has low-end running back 1 appeal. And then you've got the deeper sleepers with Derrick Henry. Even though I like DeMarco Murray, Derrick Henry has a lot of appeal. Duke Johnson, Christine Michael, Michael Lisley. Those are all deep sleeper running backs that I think have the potential to start games for fantasy owners if they draft them in 2016.
Now, you mentioned Jarvis Landry as being a breakout candidate this year. What do you think about some of the other wide receivers that could be real bargains in those middle rounds?
Amari Cooper is going in the beginning of the 3rd round in some redraft leagues, and the late second at the highest I've seen lately. And he, to me, is the top 5 wide receiver this year. So that's an example of a big-name player that people say he can't be a sleeper. Well, he can, because he's going to be, in my opinion, a top 5 wide receiver. A guy that can win you a league, and I just drafted him in my buddy league right now, Suckers. I just took Josh Gordon as my in a 60 to 70 overall player range. And that's a guy that, even if you can't use him, let's say you're in the 6th or 7th round of your league and Josh Gordon's sitting there and you already have 2 receivers, and let's say you can only start 2 receivers, you still take a guy like that because he has so much trade value if he gets back to his top 5 wide receiver status. And in the preseason, he looked like a man playing with Pop Warner children when he was on the field. And he's not even probably in football shape. And this guy could get you a ton via trade if you don't use him as your number 1 wide receiver once he comes back from suspension. So that's a guy you can win a league with. Deeper sleeper, Tyler Lockett, Seattle wide receiver. Everybody's got Doug Baldwin as the number 1 wide receiver in Seattle. Tyler Lockett's probably going to finish as the top wide receiver this year. And T.Y. Hilton's a middle-range wide receiver that I think could be a low-end fantasy wide receiver 1 this year as Andrew Luck bounces back and has the top 2 QB seasons.
He's Smitty from FantasyFootballStarters.com and SleeperU. Any surprise cuts this past week? I know that the big cuts are coming next week, but there were some cuts that have happened. As you trolled over the wires, did you see anybody that you thought, wow, I'm kind of surprised that person got cut?
Not this week. Carlos Williams was the one player so far that's kind of, shocked some people. I think next week, as you said, we'll see a few more names kind of jump into the mix there, but nothing too alarming at this point, nothing that I wasn't really expecting. Colin Kaepernick, I kind of thought might get released, but, now he might not.
Now, how about if we turn our attention to, I want to get your opinion. I was reading on Fantasy Football earlier today, 10 players to avoid at their ADP. And I thought it was kind of interesting, and I'd like to get your thoughts on these players and whether or not you agree whether they are overvalued at their current average draft position in 12-team leagues. And they start off with DeAndre Hopkins with the 8th pick of round 1, which seems a little low to me as far as where I've seen his ADP. I've seen his ADP usually around the 5th, 6th, 7th player, but they're calling him the 8th pick of round 1. High or low?
I think he's going to be the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver this year, so I think it's actually good value.
Running back Thomas Rawls of Seattle, ADP 5th pick of round 3. High or low?
Way too high. He's got the injury risk as well as Christine Michael breathing down his neck.
What about your thoughts, real quick, sidebar, C.J. Proces, they drafted. What do you think of him?
He's had trouble kind of gaining traction as any kind of backup there. There's just been talk here and there about him being released this year. So I don't think that'll happen. I think he's too dynamic. They can use him in other ways. But he's definitely struggled, and Christine Michael, I think, has a grip on that backup job. And if Rawls were to go down tomorrow or even tonight,
I think Michael would get thrusted into that lineup, and I think as long as he stayed healthy, he'd run away with the job. He's been a bold prediction of mine for years, and this is kind of his last shot and last window of opportunity to really shine.
Now, the next one on their list is running back Doug Martin of Tampa Bay, 12th pick of round 2.
A little bit high. I think that he's more of a safe, very late second rounder. You're talking about Allen Robinson, Lamar Miller, A.J. Green, some of those, Devontae Freeman, some of those players falling right in that range. And again, I like Amari Cooper, even though his ADP is at the end of round 2 or beginning of 3. I actually like him more. So I'm going to say high by about 5 to 7 picks.
Next one is quarterback Aaron Rodgers, the 11th pick of round 3. What do you think of that? Too high?
I like it. I think Aaron Rodgers and Andrew Luck bounce back this year. And anytime you can get a player that can outscore every other player in the league when they can potentially throw 40 touchdowns in any season, I think you have a steal in the 3rd round. So I love Aaron Rodgers and Andrew Luck in the middle 3rd round to the 5th round range. And they're going in the 3rd, the 5th. Every league's different.
Next one is running back DeMarco Murray of Tennessee, 1st pick of round 4.
I like it. I think I've seen him go even later, but I do like it. As long as you back him up to Derrick Henry, I think you have yourself a really sneaky low-end fantasy running back 1. And he looks really good. Both of those running backs look really good, and they're going to run the ball a lot. I really think that you can't go wrong handcuffing the two.
Sidebar on that one real quick. The wide receivers for the Tennessee Titans, nobody stands out in my opinion. What do you think about the situation there? Is Marcus Mariota going to be able to put enough of a passing threat into opponents to prevent them from keying on Murray?
I like Sharp a lot. I think Sharp is becoming kind of a sleeper wide receiver. He could end up being the number 1 in Tennessee this year. Kendall Wright has always had a ton of talent, but he needs to stay healthy. He needs to stay on the field. And Delaney Walker is essentially a wide receiver, trapped in a Gronkowski body. So I think that he has enough weapons, especially with DeMarco Murray in the passing game, to really have a good season. I think Marcus Mariota will have a really decent campaign in 2016. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, the next name on their list is wide receiver Julian Edelman, 9th pick of round 4.
9th pick, round 4, you're talking about Matt Forte, Jarvis Landry, who I just mentioned, dropping down that late in some cases. Andrew Luck, like I said, I take him over. Melvin Gordon is a breakout of mine this year. I had him as a breakout last year. I think Melvin Gordon's a better pick. So I think a little high, but he definitely could earn that value. I'm not going to call him a bust.
Next one is Arian Foster, running back Miami, 7th pick of round 5.
A little high because of the players I just named. They just feel a little safer.
Okay, next one is a guy that you've already talked about, Josh Gordon, 1st pick of round 6.
Like I said, suckers in my league. Suckers. I just drafted him, and he's going to win me the league. Thank you.
Next one is running back Amir Abdullah, 8th pick of round 7.
I like that. Round 7, you're talking about players that you could do without if they bust or and given his upside to potentially have that high-end running back 2 type season. I think it's a very, very decent risk to take. Derrick Henry is another good player around that range. Duke Johnson, Jordan Matthews, receiver for the Eagles. All those guys are good picks right there, and I don't think any of them are risky.
And the last one, you've already talked about him. We talked about him earlier, Devanta Parker, 1st pick of round 8. Way too high.
Yeah, I mean, that pick isn't so alarming that I'd say you're going to throw your season away. But, yeah, there were people in Dynasty ranking him above Landry in a lot of Dynasty circles, and I just scratched my head. Like, Landry in the 4th round is a no-risk situation. He's going to catch 100 balls. He commands that offense. He is the number 1 wide receiver in Miami.
Hey, Smitty, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to catching up with you again next Tuesday night.
Yeah, can't wait. We should have a lot more to talk about. Things happen quick in this league.
That's very true, my friend. Very true. Look forward to it. Take care. That's Smitty from SleeperU and FantasyFootballStarters.com. SleeperU, all the Dynasty content, and, of course, FantasyFootballStarters.com, everything to help you win now in your fantasy football leagues. We're going to step aside. We'll come back, wrap things up. Maybe we'll squeeze in a call real quick as well. I'm Russ Bliss. You're listening to The Red Zone, talking fantasy football in the NFL on NBC Sports Radio AM 1060. I'm live at Santisi Brothers. It's the week 1 of the Fantasy Challenge, so come on out here, show your support for the radio program, and get a 20-year anniversary t-shirt. We'll be right back to wrap things up. Welcome back to the Red Zone, final segment of the program on this Tuesday evening on NBC Sports Radio AM 1060. Stay tuned immediately following this program. It is the Sports Zoo with the Rooster every Tuesday, Wednesday evenings from 7 to 9 here on NBC Sports Radio AM 1060. 2 hours of some of the best sports talk you're going to find anywhere. And, of course, that comes up immediately following this program. Now, real quick, let's squeeze in a phone call before we call it a night. Let's go out to Phoenix and bring Tom aboard. Tom, how you doing tonight?
Good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, thank you.
So, my question is on Alshon Jeffrey. Has the hate gone too far because of his injury proneness? I picked up him I picked him up in a league, in a PPR league. It's actually with Smitty, actually. And I'm trying to possibly trade him for guys like C.J. Anderson or Lacey.
Wow. You know, Lacey, I don't think you'll be able to get. Lacey's been going in round 2 of most fantasy drafts. Alshon Jeffrey has got an ADP of the second pick of round 3 on average, usually about the 26th player off the board. So, and who was the other running back you mentioned? C.J. Anderson?
Yeah.
He's right about at the same draft spot as Alshon Jeffrey. He's going like 2 picks later on average. I just have questions about C.J. Anderson. Every year he seems to start off very slow, and then he turns it on during the season. He's great down the stretch, but you got to put up with an awful lot of blanks getting there before you start to see return. Alshon Jeffrey is going to be the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. Granted, he does have an injury history, but I tell you what, as long as he's the number 1 wide receiver, I think I'd feel a little better about him than I would about C.J. Anderson. But then again, it all also depends as to what other wide receivers and what other running backs you have on your roster, too.
Yeah, that was my issue, is because Alshon's actually my flex, because I've got Brown. So he's my flex, but my running backs are weak. It's Forte and Gore right now.
Ah, yeah, you are kind of weak at running back. If Alshon Jeffrey is just your flex wide receiver, I'd feel better about having the upgrade to C.J. Anderson from Frank Gore, who looks like as though he may be running out of steam. The Colts just signed Stephen Ridley yesterday or today, and it looks like as though he's going to get a chance to compete with Robert Turbin to be the top backup to Gore. But Gore failed to get 1,000 yards last year. Granted, he was injured some, but I think that Frank Gore is starting to come to the end of his time as a running back 2 in fantasy football.
Okay, well, you pretty much answered my questions. It looks like I'm trying to make the right move. I'm thinking the PPR portion of Alshon is going to help me if he's still in there as a flex, but I need to strengthen running back.
Yeah, got to strengthen the running back situation going on there because I don't feel good about Gore as my number 2. He's mediocre at best. He's a guy that I would go ahead and draft as my 3rd running back, but as my number 2, kind of scares me if I've got to start 2 every week.
Yeah, that's how it is right now, too. Looks like no, that's it. This looks like my give and take is going to have to be with a bad number 2 running back, but a great flex with Alshon.
Well, you know, there's always that chance that C.J. Anderson surprises everybody and comes out and finally lives up to that hype we've had about him the last 2 years.
Well, I'm hoping the guys listening because I'm trying to get C.J. right now.
Right. Well,
all right,
we'll
thanks,
see.
sir. Have a good one.
You got it, Tom. Best of luck to you. And that's pretty much going to put a wrap on the show tonight.
we think we've got like 30 seconds to music, so be sure to stay tuned immediately following this program. The Rooster and the Sports Zoo from 7 to 9. They do that every Tuesday, Wednesday evenings. Big Rooster for giving me the 6-7 time slot again so I could have a 20th consecutive year of broadcasting this radio program on these radio waves. So thank you very much, my friend. Look forward to doing the No Huddle show with him Sunday mornings, 8 to 10, here on NBC Sports Radio 60 once we get into the NFL's regular season. Got to say thanks to Aaron back in studio. Great job, my friend. Really appreciate it. And thanks to you guys. You guys are the ones who make this show rock. Yeah, half for the 20 years I've been doing it. And thanks to Smitty from SleeperU and FantasyFootballStarters.com. Tomorrow night on the program, Gary Davenport from the Bleacher Report will be joining us on the program. More fantasy football talk, more of your phone calls, and, of course, come on out here to Santisi Brothers. Show your support. Play the free Fantasy Challenge for Week 1 and get a free Red Zone 20-year anniversary t-shirt. I'm Russ Bliss. I'll talk to you again tomorrow night at 6 o'clock here on NBC Sports Radio.
This has been the Red Zone, talking fantasy football and the NFL with Russ Bliss from FantasyFootballStarters.com. The Red Zone was brought to you by Santisi Brothers Pizzeria and Sports Grill and Miller Coors, featuring award-winning pizzas, wings, calzones, strombolis, classic Italian dinners, boar's head subs, baby back ribs, chicken, burgers, soup, salads, and much more. Santisi Brothers has a sports fan's ultimate viewing experience. The wide wall of sports. Over 50 flat-screen HD TVs on one wall, including 11 63-inch plasmas and over 110 flat-screen HD TVs in all. Santisi Brothers also has pool tables and dartboards. For more information on special events like their weekly poker tournaments, go to SantisiBrothers.com or like Santisi Brothers on Facebook. Come out and play the Fantasy Football Challenge every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings live at Santisi Brothers between 6 and 8 p.m. It's all at Santisi Brothers Pizzeria and Sports Grill, just west of the I-17 on Bell Road in the Bell Canyon Pavilion. If it ain't Santisi Brothers, forget about it.
NBC Sports Radio AM 1060 is KDUS Tempe Phoenix and KUPD HD2 Tempe Phoenix.